This is Bonnie Graham, Senior Editor in the NCTE Books program, and I am interviewing Rhea Estelle Lathan, who is the author of one of our most recent books in the Studies in Writing and Rhetoric series. This is Freedom Writing, African American Civil Rights Literacy Activism, 1955 to 1967. Oh, so why don't we just start with you telling us a little bit about your book?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about my work. Freedom writing is basically about African American literacy activism during the civil rights era. It's primarily about the literacy work that was being done on the South Carolina Sea Islands, it's a story of people who are not usually included in the story of the civil rights movement and of freedom schools. So primarily, I'm talking about the freedom schools that most people when they think about the freedom schools, they think about the SCLC, they think about Septima Clark. But what I've done is I've gone back and I've looked at and talked to and written about the people who were doing the beginning of the civil rights, the freedom schools, which were called the citizenship education program.
So they were sort of the seeds.
Yes, yes.
For the freedom schools.
You're right. That's exactly right. They planted seeds. So I talk about Bernice Robinson, who actually created the curriculum, and is often not given credit for her initiating the curriculum. And a little known story is actually when the first session of the citizenship schools were beginning with Bernice Robinson doing the work. Septima Clark was actually on the West Coast doing recruiting for the Highlander Citizenship Program. So Bernice Robinson actually went in with what she thought would be the best curriculum, and when Miles Horton and Septima Clark came back in, they were like, well, this is good. They did a little tweaking, but it was actually her pedagogy and her curriculum that got taken up by the civil rights movement, and still today they're using this. They're using some of the methods that she developed. Yeah.
Well, and from what I remember from your book, it sounds like her curriculum was very much informed by what a lot of the participants in the schools needed and wanted. Exactly. They shaped a lot.
Exactly. She walked in the classroom because she wasn't a teacher; she was a beautician, and she was a beautician and a seamstress who was at home taking care of Bernice Robinson, taking care of her parents, and she was also one of the officers for the NAACP. So she got this curriculum, a second grade or third grade curriculum, thinking that, okay, I'm just teaching basic literacy. So she had this idea, the same idea that most people do when they talk about literacy or basic literacy. I'm just going to be teaching these rote exercises. And she walks into this curriculum and they're like, oh, no, this won't work. This is not what we want. We want to learn how to fill out money orders. We want to learn how to read novels and write letters, and they were, and that's one of the things that I dispel the myth that the civil rights literacy work was mostly about voting. It was about work about
right.
City, which wasn't the case. One of the people that I interviewed in the book, Andersen, he talks when he was I interviewed him. He said, I could always vote. He said voting was not an issue. I owned $300 worth of property. My value for my property was at a point where I could vote. He said it was about being able to hold on to that property because during, after Brown versus Board of Education, a lot of government, local governments were getting a little skittish about, people, black people starting to vote. So they would no longer allow him to sign an X on his deed for his property, which his parents had handed down to them since captivity. So that's the reason he joined or started working with the citizenship education program. That was his motivation. And that's one of the things I found. I found so many different motivations for wanting to participate. So the book is about telling the story of more than just civic inclusion, more than just being able to vote. It went way beyond that. Mr. Mack ended up becoming a person who started a community center, or a daycare center on Johns Island in South Carolina.
Why don't you tell people a little bit about this gospel literacy that you use?
Well, one of the things that came up for me when I was collecting my data, as I interviewed Guy Carolyn, and I'm looking at Guy Carolyn was a folklore focal. What is it
The
called?
Highlander folk.
Yeah, he was the minister of music for Highlander, and they were using music as a means to teach reading and writing, and I know, and I've always known a lot of people have written about how important music has been to learning, how important music has been to social activism, and how important music is for African American people in general. And there was always this parallel between social activism and music. And I thought, well, how does that work with learning and with literacy? And within two things are happening here. With the rise of the civil rights movement, also came the rise of gospel music. And within gospel music, you have these four core concepts: acknowledging the burden, bearing witness, and finding redemption. And actually, there's another writer, Clay Warner, he talks about it as gospel consciousness. It's a way of knowing. And that led me to thinking, well, if literacy is about acquiring knowledge, and it's about ways of knowing, well, then this gospel consciousness, there must be something here. So I started looking at the way that people are acquiring knowledge and looking at the concepts of gospel consciousness, and I came up with this gospel literacy that takes it as more than just it's just a rote act. For example, one of the things I talk about, I take it and look at it as an intellectual concept. For example, call and response. Call and response is usually considered this spontaneous activity that takes place, and in some spaces it is. But I talk about it as an intellectual activity that you have to be able to process what's happening with what, like Beverly Moss talks about shared community, and Geneva Smitherman talks about understanding the spaces that you're in, but looking at it and the language. So looking at call and response as an intellectual activity, and then taking that into the classroom and seeing how it's operating within the civil rights movement, within the freedom schools and classrooms, and the learning that was taking place. So you have these gospel literacy concepts: acknowledging the burden, bearing witness, finding redemption, and call and response.
What's maybe the most surprising thing that you learned when you were doing the research for all of this? You did so much archival research.
Yes. I think for me, it was the level of people who are not recognized and not acknowledged. And I talk about, in the beginning of the book, I talk about the civil rights fantasy, right? That you have, this man on the mountain who goes up and decides that he has a dream, poor tired roses on a bus, and old Septima is, freeing literacy. I give this kind of like narrative that it's this fantasy. And what I found out is that there were so many more people who were participating, and that it was more than just this felt activity. It was about emotion, it was about embodiment, it was about freedom, but there was so much critical intellectual activity that was taking place that required conscious knowledge and conscious thinking, and that it wasn't just about a song and a dance. And I think that for me, it became about knowing that there was a struggle, and that there was dignity in the struggle, and that it wasn't just about, it wasn't as simple as the history books try to tell us that it is. That there were more people who were participating, and I think that's what my work is mostly about, is talking about the people who haven't been traditionally talked about.
I thought one of the fun stories was at the beginning, where you talk about this Andersen man again, sort of starting the first of the citizenship schools, basically on the bus he was driving.
Esau Jenkins.
Esau Jenkins, different guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
Esau Jenkins. Yes. And he really didn't believe it. He was teaching. He had a bus service that he was driving back and forth. The people who worked in Charleston, he was driving them back and forth to from the Sea Islands to Charleston, and he taught this woman, Allison Wine. He was teaching her how to pass the voting test, and and he really didn't believe that she was going to be a because she could not read when she took the test. She had memorized everything, but this was before the citizenship schools actually started. This was got him the motivation to want to start it. But she had just memorized and went up and was standing in line and had memorized the test, was took the test and passed it. And he was like, wow, so I guess this thing might work. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was a great activist, and he was very instrumental.
Um, so this is my question about what didn't make the book. You've got so much interesting stuff in there, and I know that there's a bunch of stuff you didn't get to say. Anything you want to share with people?
Well, I think there are so many people and activities that didn't get that didn't make this cut. The relationship to the Nation of Islam, for example, and to the way that the beauticians movement. There was a beauticians movement and literacy activities that were taking place. So the Freedom School activities in the curriculum was also being implemented and taken up in beauty shops and in barber shops, and that. Bernice Robinson worked with Septima Clark to go into different communities to teach teachers how to teach this curriculum. And a lot of that, it's in the next book. That didn't make it into this project.
Well, thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say?
Without just giving the whole story of everything that's the whole book away. But I'm really really proud of the project. I'm really happy that I've been able to get it to the place where it is, where people can start to introduce, where I can start to introduce this idea that a different way of knowing, a different way of understanding literacy. I think one of the things that we don't know our history. And we don't know. Now, when I say our history, the history of the United States, and to have the opportunity to bring this forward, I'm really.
So maybe that helps answer one of the questions about what do you expect people to do, educators to do with your book? What do you hope that it achieves?
Well, one thing I hope that it gives them the understanding of the history of the civil rights movement, but also a way of looking at community-based literacy activism and what people bring into the classroom. I take up Gloria Lathan-Billings' culturally relevant pedagogy, but to be able to take like these models that I set out in the book, while they're taking place in an adult classroom in 1955, I believe that this model can be taken up in a classroom in Atlanta in 2015. If they can take the gospel literacy concepts and bring them into the classroom to teach writing. I mean, one of the things that this is what I think. Like, if you can teach hip hop literacy, you can teach gospel literacy. It's a cultural way of knowing. It's a worldview, and it works in many different places. And I think that it's just another model that we can bring into the classroom to help to learn to teach writing.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you.